everybody, and welcome to an episode of the Notorious POD. This is obviously your host, Notorious Rob. It's been a while since I've done one of these because I've been traveling like crazy throughout August, but it is good to be back talking about important and interesting topics. And I think I've got one today I'm very fortunate. As some of you know, I wrote a Red Dot white paper almost 2 years ago now, talking about photography and copyrights. And I've always thought this is one of these like super important topics that's a little technical. It's a little, little in the weeds, but it's super important for the industry. And I was fortunate enough to have guests who could really speak on this topic. So let me introduce them and bring them on first. Hello, Vince. How are you?
I'm well, Rob. How are you?
All right. Vince Collura is the Chief Operating Officer of VHT Studios. Is that the actual name of the company?
That is the name of the company. Yeah.
All right. And you guys, I know you're a major player in the real estate photography game. You guys are up to a bunch of things that we're going to get into in this podcast. Very excited. Thanks for joining us. And also joining us is Lucy Edwards, who is the Director of Client Success for VHT Studios. How are you, Lucy?
Hi, how are you doing? Very happy to be here. Thank you.
Oh, so excited to have you guys on because I think I talk about this issue quite a bit, but there's no substance to having experts who have to deal with this every single day. So before we kind of dive into the topic, maybe starting with you, Vince, how'd you get into this crazy, insane space of ours?
Yeah, funny enough, I got into this years and years and years ago. I had a tech company that I started before I was able to drink, right? So we're talking 1999. And we stumbled into, after doing a bunch of retail stuff and doing a bunch of government work, we just gravitated towards real estate. We did websites for Element, Christie's, a bunch of the New York companies. And a couple of years in, there was a Christmas party. There was a lot of alcohol consumed, and there was an incident, which put real estate photography on my radar.
Okay.
And then about a year after that, I was proposing some major redesigns to all of the companies. And I had asked about the photography assets, right? I said, where's your repository? We want to up-res things, right? Cable modems were now a thing. And across the board, people just gave me blank stares.
Right. Photo what?
So I ended up, they're like, you could email our photographers. I'm like, what? Wait, where are the photographs? So I founded Gotham Photo Company, which initially was going to be a platform play, right? Mm-hmm. We weren't going to be part of the service at all. But we recognized Manhattan needed high-end photography. We built a photography firm around that. Mm-hmm. Gotham was terribly successful. And eventually I sold it, took that company public, and eventually that's what brought me to VHT.
Okay.
VHT purchased Gotham.
Right on. All right. And Lucy, how did your journey end up in our crazy world?
Absolutely. I just wanted to add to Vince's story. And I've known Vince for many, many years before VHT. I can tell you, everyone in New York City and the whole metropolitan area worked with Gotham. Mm-hmm. So we used to have our marketing company and we could not even come close in competition. So sure. Yeah, the company had great success, quality, absolutely. And the way we started, my husband and I, about 20 years ago, it's a funny story. We decided to open an Airbnb, and I don't know why I wanted to have Airbnb with my energy, but we found Tanana Lake in upstate New York, created a floor plan, how the Victorian is now and how we can see it in the future. Peter took some photos with his rather inexpensive camera, and we put together a brochure. We went through business plan. Make the story short, thank God it didn't go through because it's commercial property and you had to have everyone on that huge lake to sign off on it. Mm-hmm. But someone at Sotheby's noticed our floor plans and they said, you have amazing floor plan, not like anyone else. So why don't you work with us and be our vendor for floor plans? And that's how we started. And then we took it to New Jersey. I knocked on every door. As you can see, I'm not very shy. And back for business. And we brought floor plans to New Jersey. By that time, Peter got really good camera and he was practicing. I learned how to do floor plans. And I guess from my previous life, since I'm in Russia, everyone had to do one sort of the other of engineering. So I was able to accomplish that task. And we started growing business and we grew it pretty big and pretty large. We merged with our partners from Midwest And then 2 years ago, VHT bought us out, and I'm no longer an owner. I don't have to think about payroll or taxes or anything like that, but I still, it's my business. I love being part of VHT. I consider myself a partner, and I certainly enjoy my new title as Director of Client Success, as now I get to interview leaders in real estate industry. I talk about products and services and the importance of marketing strategy. And I have my own talk show, Lunch with Lucy. So
All right.
I'm having fun,
All right.
enjoying every single minute of it.
All right. Decaf for you, Lucy, going forward. I just want to say.
Well, there's no such thing. There's no such thing.
All right.
I will be on top of the Empire State Building.
I can see this could be a high energy one, and I love that. Normally, I refrain from doing this on, but hey, you know what? Let's have this conversation. I love it.
Bygones be bygones.
Hey, all right, so let's dive in. And I think you guys read the paper that I was mentioning. So my issue from from 2000 whatever 18 when I really learned about this, it was from this lawsuit called Strauss versus Redfin, which last time I checked is still, I mean, I guess it's an unpublished opinion, so it's a little hard to know, but it's a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals case, right? Decision, meaning it's not just some trial court this is an appellate court decision that set out some really key things. And I remember reading this going, oh my God, I have to talk about this with my clients, right? Since I'm a consultant in the industry and doing research for it. And even since then, over the last 3 years or so, I still feel this is the case. I think the understanding of photography and copyrights in the real estate industry is extraordinarily weak. And there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings of how that works, number one. And number two, that leads to some real problems. And I know you guys are right in the midst of it. So maybe I could have you, Vince, like just kind of talk, to the audience about what it is that they don't understand. Start there.
Sure. So I mean, it's interesting because photography or media creation in general, right? It's an art. It's governed by copyright law. And we look at it in this industry very much like it's a work for hire, like it's just a hard asset, right? Like you're buying a brick, right? Not a copyrightable work of art.
Right.
And it's funny because when you had said this industry, sort of it doesn't have a great understanding of it. Yeah, I feel like, my role is that of an educator these days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like so many of the conversations really come in and it's like, okay, cool. We've got to go to square one, explain how copyright works, et cetera, et cetera. If I could do it all over, right, maybe I just stay in the music industry or something, because that's an industry that matured into it, right?
Right.
Whereas we're being thrust into it. And, to a certain extent, it makes sense, right? Like, this industry was born out of MLSs were printing, right? We're printing out books. This wasn't an issue. That stuff sat on a shelf and eventually aged out. But now we've got the internet. Now we've got, and you touched on this in your in the red dot I read. Technology moves really fast. The law doesn't move really fast. No. We're dealing with laws that were created before there was the ability to duplicate something easily.
Correct.
Never mind digitally.
Correct.
Right? So, it's astonishing how little anybody in the industry understands. And, that starts with the photographers too, right? Sure. That covers the photographers. We're not thinking about it more often than not.
Sure. So from what I wrote, and tell me if this is still true, because you guys have a pending case before the Ninth Circuit, right? Because it's an appeal from I think it's VHT versus Zillow, right?
That's correct.
Right. Because you won some and you lost some at the trial level. And I think both parties appealed, both parts, right? So it's like, we shouldn't have lost that. And you guys are like, oh, we shouldn't have lost that. And is that still ongoing? Is that still pending?
It is still ongoing. We've got a bench trial later this month.
Okay. So as I understand things, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the main issue really, again, the law is completely outdated, and even this real estate photography thing really wasn't an issue until the internet came along, because, in order to go get photographs and then actually print them somewhere, it's a hassle, and, it just didn't happen that much. So the essential problem is the difference between work for hire versus licensed, right? And then the type of license, there's the exclusive
Mm-hmm.
license and the non-exclusive license, right? So
Yep.
VHTC, you guys are one of the largest real estate photography sort of providers in the country, right? About roughly how many
Correct.
photographers do y'all have in the network?
We've got over 500.
Over 500. Okay. What's your standard license? Like when someone goes to
So
VHT and says, "Hey, I want photos taken of this house."
sure. So our standard license is a non-exclusive license
Mm-hmm.
that is crafted to grant the agent and more often than not the brokerage firm everything they need to market the listing or market themselves as an agent or broker.
Right.
So, quite literally any application that falls into that is, viable. What it doesn't cover is true ownership, right? We do not transfer copyright. We don't transfer ownership over the asset
Mm-hmm.
itself. And it's non-transferable, which is the crux of the problem, right?
Mm-hmm. So tell me
That the
why is
industry,
that? Why that is the crux of the problem from your perspective?
it's the crux of the problem because the tech companies, the MLSs, the aggregators, they assume ownership. And it seems that so much of the industry is just wired to transfer ownership or transfer rights. And in a lot of cases, right, Zillow is one of them, transfer rights that they don't even have.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, it basically puts the industry in a really contentious position where there's this sort of hot potato of copyright violation.
Right.
Right. It's, well, I didn't do anything wrong. The agent said that they owned the copyright.
Right.
They gave me these rights. And the
Right.
agent says, well, I didn't do anything wrong. Right.
Right. Right. So how does that actually play out then, right? Because so this is something I put it on the red dot, right? Because what I saw was if rights flow down or no rights flow up, right? Then indemnification flows down, right? In other words,
Right.
there comes a point where Zillow might go, hey, we got these photos from our MLS partners, right? Under license. They claim that they own the
Right.
right to do this. The MLS goes, we thought we had the right to this because our brokers gave them to us under the participation
Right.
agreement. The broker goes, we thought we had the right to this because our agent says they own the photograph, right? So
Right. And the agent says, well, I thought I owned the photograph because I paid something for it.
correct. And
Yeah.
and then now it's like, no. So like in them, it's like you gotta pay me, you gotta pay me, you gotta pay me, and all this stuff. Now, as far as I know, you guys have never sued an MLS or a broker or an agent over this, have you?
Right. We haven't. And I don't see us doing that. Right. Like,
Right.
I don't think you get very far in business suing your clientele.
Right.
Especially though, when the clientele they're not purposefully doing something wrong. Right. They're, even though we've spent, days, weeks and months educating, at the end of the day, our clients, they're not monetizing these photographs. They're not,
Right.
they're not the ones stealing a benefit, right?
Right.
In theory.
Right.
Right. So we have to make sure that we aim our sort of legal guns at where the problems are and, sort of que bono, right? Who benefits?
Yeah. So Lucy, as director of client success, like how much time do you spend educating clients about this issue? That
Well, that is one of my biggest roles, is to make sure that we put VHT on a map as a marketing company and with marketing strategies. So when I do my presentations, I have my videos, educational videos, also on photography and how many images you need, and other products and services. But photography is the base. And I always say the house has the foundation. The foundation of your marketing is photography. I mean, if you can't afford to pay for 10, 15, 20 images, you probably do not deserve to take that listing. It's just out of respect to your seller and to your client. So I talk about it and I stress on the photography, and then I go to other products that will help you as an agent introduce the listing and market yourself.
Yeah, but how much do you explain about photography copyright and what they are actually getting, what they are and are not allowed to do with this?
So the way I introduce it to our agents is that, again, after you do take care of your images, the images belong to VHT photographers. However, you are free to use them to market the property, advertise yourself as well, use it in your presentations. So they are 100% yours to use to promote that particular listing.
Do you
go ahead.
Do you tell them that they can't do this for sold listings? Because that's the crux of this problem.
Right. No, I don't talk about sold listings. I only talk about current listings. And also, if you sold it, but you still would like to use it in your marketing material for the listing
Right.
presentation for yourself, you can do that.
Right.
But
Right.
you cannot sell
That,
your
that,
images to another agent.
that's that's an interesting place where the problem sort of bifurcates, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the agent and the brokerage firm, we support their use of sold
Of
sold
course,
listing
for
imagery.
marketing purposes,
And,
absolutely.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly.
Right. The issue is, as I put in the
Whereas,
red dot, they
yep,
put in the MLS, right? Sold the property. They've done their part. But the MLS now has those images in its sold database for perpetuity, right? Like
right,
forever. Okay.
right.
Then the Zillows and the Redfins of the world come along because they're tech companies and they want to provide value to the users. And let's face it, as a consumer, I would love to see, right? Hey, what did this home look like 3 years ago, 5 years ago when it was sold, right? And
Right.
through VOW and through other things, and NAR passed a rule around sold over IDX. So now brokerages can put sold data over IDX. Okay, now what do you do with these photographs, right? Because now the agent and broker has nothing to do with it except they gave it to the MLS, right?
Right.
So I know it's a tricky thing, but this to me is where the legal problem exists. So do you guys have to explain that to the agent? Is what I'm wondering.
We do, so with the brokerage firm, right? We
Right.
tend to not have to get too into this with the agents, right? Fortunately, some of the biggest offenders have done a great job, right? Because we're sold images most often viewed,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, I bought this home 5 years ago.
Right.
Right now, you could look it up on a website that rhymes with pillow,
Right. Right.
and you could see something that looks like a listing,
Right.
right? And the most egregious act, which is a violation of our rights as well as violations of what I'm going to say the agent's implied rights are when you see the photographs that were shot for an agent named Jessica Mileto for this home,
Mm-hmm.
and it's shown on a Zillow listing, right, with a price, right? There's estimate price, whatever. And now there's a different agent's photograph
Mm-hmm.
right at the top of it because that agent owns the zip code, right? That's a great example of where rights are just destroyed, right? Trounced on. And the agents, they can understand that. The brokerage firms can understand that. So it's a very specific example, but it's like when copyright violations go wild, this is what it looks like.
Right. But I don't think it's actually that narrow an example. And here's what I mean. Where sold data is used most often is CMAs.
Well, so number of times, yes. I'm saying where it's viewed most often.
Of course,
right?
but right. So again, I go on Redfin, I look at sold, records, and it has like 37 photographs. It's like they're
Right.
lovely, beautiful photographs. I'm like, oh, this sold in the neighborhood, right? And and again, whether it's a consumer doing it, it's sold. I mean, it's already sold, so it's not like I can buy it. So why am I as a consumer viewing that, right? It's because I
Right.
either want to know, hey, how is this comparable to the house that I'm actually looking to buy, right? So I can try to figure out is the price fair or whatever, right? Or I'm looking to sell my house and I'm looking for houses that look similar to mine, right? So photographs are incredibly important in that use. At the agent side, when you do a CMA, a comparable market analysis, right? You have to pull photos. Otherwise, what's the point? It's like, okay, here's a
Right.
3-bed, 2-bath. Here's a 3-bed, 2-bath, and yeah, except that one is a 2-story, colonial, and the other is a ranch. Like, are those really comparable? So you run into that. Photos are incredibly important, and the issue, from what I can tell, is the license you mentioned, non-exclusive for the purpose of sales, like marketing that property or self-promotion. When another agent goes to the MLS and uses those photographs,
It's not covered.
it's not covered. And nobody thinks about this.
Right.
I disagree because MLS does not allow and certainly does not encourage agents to use someone else's photos.
Oh, no,
Because
no,
another
Lucy.
agent
This is what I'm
can
saying.
come in
No,
and
they
complain.
absolutely encourage for a CMA.
Oh, yeah, but
Right?
not to promote if someone gets the list.
Yeah, no, not that. No,
Yeah.
the MLS will go after them. But what I'm saying is the MLSs don't think about the fact that so Lucy, the agent, has gone and had a photographer take a bunch of photos. You sold the house, right? 3 years later, Vince comes along and runs a comps report using Lucy's photographs right, in the MLS. And unless your license specifically allows for that, I'm like, that is, you're not selling. First of all, even if you are trying to sell the property, you're not the agent, right? And two, you're not selling the property, and you're not promoting stuff really, because what you're doing is
right. It's definitely blatantly not covered, and it speaks to the reason I think this. I want to say for a long time this issue is overlooked, Rob. I don't.
Oh yeah,
again,
sure.
I don't believe there's a cabal of evil sons.
No.
I'm not going to say it right. Ultimately, the MLSs look at the photography assets as data,
correct,
and nothing more.
Correct,
right? And rightfully said earlier when you had called out, hey, if you just look at the points, right? 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,500 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,200 square feet. That's not enough to really compare.
Correct.
Right? That's like calling us humans is
right.
accurate.
Right.
Calling you and I male is accurate, and
right.
Lucy female is accurate.
Right.
But we're clearly
right.
different people.
Right. It's almost like trying to imagine a dating website with no photos. Like
right.
It just doesn't work. I mean, it's the most
important
I'm
old
thing.
enough. I was on BBSs, man. I remember those days.
So, follow culture. Do you guys have conversation with MLSs about photo copyrights? Because again, brokers and agents, I don't expect them to get into this. I really don't. I do kind of believe though that the MLS, which effectively is the outsourced provider to the brokers and agents with respect to data and copyrights and all of these tools, like they should have a better understanding. Like, do you guys have MLSs coming to you and say, hey, so talk to us about photo copyrights?
So not as often as I would like. There's a couple of markets where we have enough of a dominant presence where we can be at the table with them. But overall, the MLSs, they don't want to have these conversations.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah, I mean, they're complex conversations. I think by having the conversation, you're sort of putting yourself in a position where you're admitting there's a problem, right? And we've had a really hard time having some of them, right, knocking on those doors, because I think ultimately our friends at NAR, a lot of the work they've done kind of masks this problem, right, or gives what the MLSs believe to be an out. So we've had a hard time having some of those conversations. I'll say there are some good ones where there's a very healthy dialogue.
So first of all, before we get to the good ones, you said where there's an out. What's the out that you're referring to?
The NAR with their work for hire agreements, right?
Okay.
Which has inspired the MLSs to do a lot of the same, right?
Yeah.
For an MLS to be able to point to the National Association of Realtors and say, hey, we've solved this problem already to their clientele is very strong.
So why is that not a solution? Because it does seem like it is a solution if you say, listen, if you want to be submitting photographs to the MLS, it has to be work for hire.
Sure. So it's an extremely one-sided solution.
Of course.
Right? I'll say it does solve some problems.
Right.
It does nothing to protect the agent or brokerage. Right.
Okay.
It's entirely there to, protect the MLS. Well, I'll say it does protect the agent or brokerage from the sort of that downstream liability for the MLS's violations.
Right. Okay. All right. So when you say you have the good ones, like tell me what the solutions are with the good ones that you're pointing out.
So there are some MLSs where we have licensing agreements, right?
Okay.
That cover the market, and their work for hire agreements that they distribute. I don't know. I'm getting a little bit of feedback.
Yeah, I'm getting feedback.
Lucy, it might be coming through you. Can you mute? I'm going to ask you to mute. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. This is why I have these things. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I didn't.
Oh, no worries. You're from the music industry. You're sensitive to that sort of thing, man. I get it.
Right? I need my giant speakers so I can hear you and I talk. So, okay, when you look at the issue ultimately, right, you find yourself in a situation where, certain MLSs we can have agreements with that cover. So you'll see that the MLSs have distributed those same type of agreements to their agents. There's blatantly a call out for VHT. It's you need to have this work for hire agreement unless you're using one of these, one,
provider.
2, or 3
okay.
providers.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we could spend half an hour talking about the problems, right? And
we can spend days doing it, but
we
don't have
could,
the time.
but you know, I do want to actually start discussing potential solutions that don't involve lawyers, if possible, right? You know, litigation is expensive and it's slow and doesn't really help anybody. And I'm fairly sure you guys are not, like, you're not excited to be going to court, you know, to try and whatever. So the question for you is this:
Dude, I was in my 20s when that case started. No, I'm kidding.
yeah, right. So, what, in your view, is the solution to this? Like, how? Because again, the issue here, to some extent, is the fact that we have laws that are written like in the 1700s. I mean, literally, copyright is in the Constitution of the United States. Like,
Right.
you know, it's that old. And then we have technology where obviously what the user wants is they want to be able to go to a website and look at all the photos. They want to be able to do that. The websites don't want to provide all the photos. The brokers and agents would love to provide all the, like, there's all of these things, but the issue is copyright law and this new technology environment doesn't work together. So from VHT Studio, like, from your perspective, what's the solution?
Sure. So, you know, the solution that's needed is something that, you know, sort of manages the rights in an appropriate way. Look, even as a photographer, right? Like, I'm a photographer. When I create a photograph, I want it seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Artists want their work seen.
Right.
So in theory, if you peel out all of the BS, right, our interests are aligned. I want my clients to be successful. I want my work to be seen. I want to produce great work,
Mm-hmm.
right? So how do we get from where we're at today to there? I think technology, right, a rights management platform, some standards within the industry goes a long way. And I think whatever it looks like, you know, you take a cue from iTunes, right? And what they did with the music industry, it needs to be easy.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be affordable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Strauss versus Redfin, there's a potential huge liability there that far exceeds what any reasonable sort of photographer would expect going into something that's just a regular listing shoot.
Right.
Right. I'm not looking to make $1 million per photograph, right?
Right.
I'm looking to make sure that where my work is utilized, I'm compensated.
Right.
The websites, the aggregators, the places that are displaying, they're not looking to, you know, rob anyone. They just don't have the mechanism. There's no tool that makes this easy.
Right.
How do you attribute what is the value of a view on a CMA, right? What percentage of a penny is that one view worth, right? We could figure that out, I'm sure, but there's models, right? There's the music industry, there's the advertising industry, right? And if you look at that way that industry works, right, you're looking at impressions, you're looking at click-throughs, stuff like that. So I think there's a lot of models that we could go to, but the first thing that really needs to happen is education at the right points. I don't think everybody in the industry needs to be a copyright expert or anything like that.
Yeah.
I think there's a couple of tiers within the industry that need to understand it. And then the folks at the ground who are actually out there shooting and doing these things need to say, no, you know what? My work is worth protecting.
So let me ask Lucy this as well, because I mean, you're talking to clients, you're talking to brokers and agents. Do you do any talking to your photographers?
I'm sorry, for some reason it broke up.
Yeah, do you do any talking to your actual photographers?
Oh yes, I enjoy working with photographers as well.
Yeah.
Not maybe so much at VHT, but when I had my own company,
Sure.
We always cherished our photographers. That is our asset, and we encourage them to produce the best images ever and to put their heart into it. Before VHT, we were not as strict with our photographs because we were much smaller and we didn't have that policy. But once we joined VHT Studios, we realized the advantage of protecting our photographers and our images.
How much do they understand these copyright issues? Because one of the things, you know, that I've personally noticed is there seems to be a real difference between, I guess we'll call sort of high-end architectural photography, like an Alex Strauss, and the guy you call is like, hey, I took a listing, I need 24 photos and it's $39.99. Like, there's a huge difference between the two. How much do the 39.99 guys understand about photography, about licensing, about intellectual property, and so on and so forth?
So, it's interesting out the gate.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't, right? And we've put a lot of time and money into building that dialogue. I'll say, even within our network, we've got photographers that are commercial photographers that are out there making thousands of dollars a shoot when they're not working for VHT. They obviously get it. But even, Joe, a photographer who's 2 years in the business, who's shooting listings at, sort of the base level in, Chattanooga, right? They're now building an understanding of what this means. And they get it. Ultimately, the network looks at our role as, okay, when I'm working with VHT, I don't need to worry about that stuff. They've got me covered, right? And we make sure that when we're onboarding photographers, they understand not only what they're signing, right? Because we do end up with ownership over the work, right? But they understand why they're signing it. And then we put a lot of work into making sure those copyright protections that we enforce, all of that benefit streams down, right? So we have photographers that are, pleasantly surprised every couple of months when they see a random check not attached to a job they shot that month, because we've created another license for that photograph.
Right. Okay.
So we make sure that it's education, and really, if we're going to champion this issue for the industry, we need to make sure that we're keeping our house in order.
Right. So because that's, to me, one of the challenges here. This could get adversarial very quickly.
Oh yeah.
And to your point, if you're a photographer, you want to get hired. You want your work to be seen. You want your client, you want the brokers and agents who hired you to be happy, and you want to keep getting repeat business and all of that. So it's, and again, the brokers and agents have no interest in taking those photos and trying to sell it off or something. They're just doing their job. Right. So it's just, there's got to be a way to do this in a non-adversarial fashion. But so are you guys working on any technology to do this digital rights management type stuff?
So we're speccing out a lot of stuff. Right now we're at the sort of, writing up the business cases a little bit more in depth. As you know, we're involved with some associations, and unfortunately we haven't seen the kind of movement that we would want. So we've brought on a couple of people, this guy, David Ward, who at some point I want to introduce you to, Rod.
I'd love to.
Really sharp guy.
Yeah.
Looking at the business cases, and then, sort of looking at the technologies that are out there, because it's a good time for this in terms of solutions, right? You were mentioning blockchain earlier. I know the guest.
We're going to get into that as part 3 for sure.
Yeah, there's so much, and there's services that make it easy. So yeah, I'm confident that, unlike 5 years ago, the tech is there to make this something that can be seamless.
Is there so I think you had mentioned this in our sort of prep call, but why is there not like an ask cap for photography, I guess, is one question. In other words, that nonprofit or whatever, some organization, that's all they do is just do copyright, why don't we have that?
Yeah, so I think it represents one of the challenges in the industry, right? It's the wild, wild west. I think the reason there's no ASCAP for real estate photography is the same reason there's no, centralized source of listing data across the country, right? It was very regional, right? Real estate in and of itself by definition is completely regional, and people existed and solved problems in a bubble. I would say also, why there's no unilateral or kind of dominant trade association really comes down to, it's not seen as a problem, right? We talked about entertainment earlier. We referenced the music industry. That industry was born into thinking about distribution, thinking about syndication and all that stuff. So that problem had to be solved right out the gate. With photography, specifically real estate photography, it wasn't, and often not, it's still not seen as a problem, because there's a novelty element, right? The $39 photographer you were referencing earlier, that dude is super stoked that he gets to do the thing that he enjoys most, right? Creating a photograph, and he gets paid for it.
Right.
He's not thinking about, I'm creating a work of art that is copyrightable.
Right. What's really interesting about this, and I've had this conversation with a lot of MLS leaders over the years, and even long experienced CEOs don't understand this. Nothing in the MLS is copyrightable other than the photographs and the property
Right.
description, right? And that's a Supreme Court case. It's like when they understand, like, oh, I
Yeah.
better pay some attention to this photography stuff. All right. Um, so since you brought it up, let's just move into sort of the futuristic thing, because in the present, I mean, maybe it's VHT, maybe it's other organs. I don't know what organizations there are in photography world, but y'all need to get together and do an ASCAP and come up with sort of licensing models and learn from the music people, learn from the advertising people. Fine. Clearly, these solutions can be technological, because there's no way, just thinking as an MLS, right? I can't go and execute lengthy licensing agreements, especially when one photographer says, okay, well, I'm willing to grant exclusive rights, the other one says I'm not. It just it's too much. No one's going
No, it's
to
got to
do
be
that.
tech.
It's got to be
Yeah.
technology, right? So the most promising one that we've kind of touched on is blockchain and NFTs. Like, are there folks? Are you guys, for example, are you working on tokenizing photos, because these are digital assets ultimately, especially in 2021. I can't remember the last time I saw somebody with one of those Hasselblad film cameras, right? Everything is digital.
Right.
Have you guys looked into that? Are you guys working on that?
So it's very much referenced in the cases that we're building up and talking through. So yeah, I mean, when you think about NFTs, the asset itself becomes the token, right? So, this is why I say it's such a great time to be solving this problem, because we can make it seamless. So yeah, I mean, NFTs, you think about blockchain, you think about everybody who's invested in blockchain.
Right. And smart contracts, which could make some of these rights management super easy. Like, hey, do you want the work for hire? Click this button if you want the whatever, and then the smart contract is going to handle all of it. Yeah.
And that's the look. You said super easy. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to be easy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll never say piracy was solved.
Yeah.
Right. But if you look at piracy over the years, and then you look at the advent of iTunes, right? It's like a crossing graph, right? Boom.
Right.
It's down as much as up, right? Right at that inflection point. And the real reason was this for the success. It's twofold, right? They made it easy.
Yep.
Right. It's easier to license a song than it is to pirate it now.
Yep.
And they've made it fair value.
Yep.
Right. I don't need to spend hundreds of dollars for whatever the license would be to play this song today.
Yeah.
Nope. I need to transact, right? I do it through Spotify. I do it through iTunes. So we have the technology now. We've got to figure that out. And we've got to most importantly, just get sign off, and that's the importance of these cases, right? In my opinion, Strauss versus Redfin, VHT Studios versus Zillow, the damages, the results of those cases are only as important as the changes they bring forth in the industry.
So, Lucy, when you're talking to clients, there is something before we delve even further into this that was mentioned, and I've always been curious. Why do agents decide to just take photos with their iPhones?
And I do not understand that, though I preach professional photography only. Even companies that cover 100% of photography, and they are not ledgering the agent, it's their consistent marketing strategy. So the company will pay for it. All you have to do is place an order. And even in those cases, with the help of the corporate and the managers and everyone else, agents still manage to take their own photos. So what we are noticing that the management, especially the ones who are investing financially into programs like that, they punish agents by not putting their photography on online, or they're not included in their websites and so on. So it's getting better, but it's only when someone can control the situation. But if you take the company that is not participating financially, then we just have to educate one by one, by company, agent, manager, and it's a full-time job. Let me tell you, our sales team is really on it.
So I know there's been like a number of things I've seen and heard over the years, but I was wondering if you guys have any research. In other words, do consumers care? Right.
Well, consumers care, yes, by far. You really have potential sellers who will interview agents and will not hire anyone without professional marketing strategy.
But that's anecdote. How do you know the consumers care? Like, what's the data? Do you guys have a study on? I would love to
So
see that.
we did a study a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did a study a couple of years back. This was right before I joined VHT, so I'm a little fuzzy on the specifics. But we were able to see that listings with professional photography sold X% quicker. Right?
It's that data.
And that's,
yeah.
yeah, I mean that data in and of itself is huge. And look, ultimately, I think there's 3 reasons an agent would shoot their own listing. Right. The first is convenience.
Sure.
Even though we've got photographers all across the country, right? Even though there's photographers, whether they're mine or not, in every market,
Right.
you still can't get quicker or easier than taking your phone out, at the end of the signing, right? So there's that. Then there's the, expense, right? So an agent could value convenience. They could also just value, hey, I don't want to spend the money, right? They're cheap. I think the third factor, which is sort of the biggest, most nebulous, is define photograph real quick for me, Rob.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Still image?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is, right, I'm gonna take a selfie with you both right now for my
Yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah.
That is technically a photograph. Mine's not even that good, right?
Right.
But so is, the photograph that I take out my digital camera, I mount it on a tripod, I light, right?
Yep.
So there's this nebulous definition of photograph, right? And it's seen even at the MLS, right? When you do your upload, right? There's no difference between the JPEG my iPhone outputs and the JPEG that gets captured by a photographer in 8 frames,
Sure.
edited by somebody and curated.
Sure.
So there's a nebulous nature of the definition of photograph. And I think that, the better these things get,
Lucy,
the
we're
harder it
feedback.
is.
All right.
So the better thing, it's all good. So the better these things get, the harder it is to see the technical difference between a photograph and what you shoot with your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just don't think average Joe understands that, right? Because we now have this capability. Whereas 20 years ago, if I was making a photograph, I was a photographer. Like that was, or 50 years ago, right? Sure. The only people who had cameras were photographers.
Sure. So go back to the.
I just would like to add. I think educating our clients, agents, is also very important. And I hear Vince and I were on other platforms before, and the way Vince feels about images, even the language is different. It's not an angle, Lucy. It's a composition. So that is important. So if we introduce it to our clients, our realtors, the importance of professional approach, it's not an angle, it's not a picture, it's an image, it's a photograph, it's professional, and it has beautiful composition that the photographer put his heart into it in his talent. I think that's important, and that's what we're working on very, very hard.
Right. So the thing that I guess I'm curious about, first of all, if you guys don't know Natalie over at Proppy, I think you guys should probably give her a ring, because they're, I think, one of the big blockchain sort of tokenization companies. They've always been thinking about tokenizing actual real estate assets. I'm kind of thinking maybe they should look at starting to tokenize photographs, with you guys, because that's an immediate problem that the MLS's brokers and agents need solved. That's an immediate problem Zillow and Redfin and all these guys need solved. Nobody wants to get sued by VHT. Nobody wants that. And it's like, listen, it's tokenized. The fee is whatever, 0.001 cent per, view. Or I'm sure all those guys would be more than happy to do that. So I know Natalie watches it because she's been interviewed on this. So Natalie, give Vince a ring.
Natalie, give me a call.
I was actually on Natalie's podcast.
Okay,
twice.
so there you go. So second thing, though, I guess from a futurist, I'm a little curious about it. And I hadn't thought about this, and so it's just coming to me right now, is with the advent of things like streaming, right, becoming more and more popular, like a TikTok video and things like that, do those have the same type of copyright issues as photos?
So it's interesting when you look at TikTok, you look at Instagram, right?
Yeah.
All of the rights are, very much captured by the technology, right?
They assert to license. TikTok asserts ownership, right?
Yeah, in order to create a TikTok, I'm assigning license before I've even captured pixels, right? Or I'm assigning ownership. And same thing with all of the social media platforms. And I think that for live streams, that makes sense, right? Because to a certain extent, at least here and now, you can't layer in smart contracts or anything like that,
Sure.
right? It defeats the purpose,
sure.
Right? The content is created exclusively for that usage.
Right.
So I don't think it sees the same problem. I think that somebody is going to argue that point in the future when there's content that is more valuable.
Interesting. All right. So this is, I know, listen, I'm a real estate nerd, you know, we all are. So I think this is super fascinating. And like I said, even though that paper was in 2018, here we are in 2021, this is still very much a live issue. I know for a fact that brokers, agents, MLSs do not think and talk enough about photo copyrights and sold data and, you know, potential exposure to liability and all of these things, right? I know that for a fact. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this is to sort of alert people, hey, please be aware of this, number one. And number two, let's try to not make this adversarial, right? Because this doesn't have to be VHT is suing us. This doesn't have to be, how do we oppress the crap out of photographers? It doesn't have to be that way. It could be in partnership. Like, how do we figure this out, right? So there's a win-win for everybody, you know?
Yeah, I would like to add to that, Rob. I just would like to add, taking into consideration agents' approach. From one side, they don't want to think about the rights, the copyright, and who owns the photos. From another side, once they pay for their photos, and then another agent basically steals them away, downloads them from either Zillow or MLS or wherever, and use it for their own advertisement because now it's their listing, then the original agent is extremely upset.
Sure.
And suddenly it becomes very personal, right?
Right, but yeah, there's no debate on that one, and the MLSs will go after agents for that. But you're saying, Vince?
So what I was going to say, you know, just to circle back before I bring up my point, the Lucy example is a great, you know, sort of builder or illustration of some of this need, and I think that, you know, it speaks to what I was just about to say, that interests can be aligned very easily. Look, the brokerage firms and the agents, they want photography that's going to sell a listing. They want professionals. They want beautiful imagery, and they want to pay as little as possible, right? Out of pocket.
Of course.
If we don't, so it's sort of, if we solve this problem, you can continue to have that. If we erode at the value of these assets like we're doing, 10, 15 years from now, you don't have good photography anymore because nobody can afford to provide the service. So you get a kid with a camera, and then the second that kid with a camera can shoot anything else they do, they're gonna be right out of the industry. Whereas right now, if you look at the landscape, Rob, there's a lot of really good photographers that are transitioning into more traditional commercial architectural, but we can retain that talent if we play our cards right. We can treat a home like it needs to be treated if we as an industry get together on this. And I think you're right. You know, it is adversarial right now because it's a lot of, you know, people fear what they don't understand, and nobody understands this issue.
Right.
So I think it's just education and making sure we're always illustrating just how aligned our interests can be.
Right. No, look, I mean, I think I've said this to a number of my clients. Like, look, the next time you guys have some MLS board meeting, you might want to bring somebody in, maybe call Vince, you know, maybe call Lucy to come in and talk about this issue, because I can almost guarantee there's not an MLS in the country that knows exactly how to handle this photography copyright issue perfectly. You know, and again, part of it is that the technology doesn't exist. And if the technology doesn't exist, we're talking about you know, thousands and thousands of paper forms or PDF forms. You know, it's not doable, right? Yeah. So I think there could be some sort of partnership. Maybe it's a three-way. Maybe you guys do the licensing model. Maybe Proppy comes up with the NFT, you know, thing, or maybe Zillow and Redfin say, hey, here's how it's the easiest way of handling it. Something does need to happen though, because
absolutely, and it needs to be accessible, right? The solution that's going to work for VHT has to be the solution that will also work for Joe A Photographer and work for our competitors and work for the agent who's shooting their own stuff.
And work for Zillow and Redfin and those guys, because they're not going to pay $1 per usage. It's just not going to happen. It has to be reasonable fee, and everyone has to be happy with it. You know. All right, cool. So, given that, if people want to get a hold of you guys, how do they reach you? Vince, let's start with you. If MLS CEO wants to get a hold of you, invite you, how do they reach you?
Sure. Well, if you want to get in touch with me, Vince at VHT.com. Or you can hit me up on Instagram, Action Vance on Instagram.
Action Vince.
Action Vance, actually. Vince with an A.
Action Vance? Oh, you got it.
Yeah.
So, tell me.
You had this brief moment where you're like, shoot, have I been calling him Vince this whole time and his name is Vance? No, it's just my Instagram handle.
So tell me about how that happened. Just the previous...
when I was like 18, I was dating a girl from the South. She called me Vance.
Oh, gotcha.
That's it.
Action Vance. Right on. All right.
Love that Southern charm.
And Lucy, how do people get a hold of you if they want to?
Well, I am Lucy E at VHT.com, and I also have my website, which is VHT.com/learn. And my Instagram is Lucy Edwards VHT. I believe in social media. I'm big on social media.
All right, right on. Obviously, when we're talking to people in the photo industry, Instagram is going to be the thing they mention first, not Facebook, not Twitter. That's awesome. All right, hey, listen, thanks very much for your time, and hopefully this was of moderate interest to at least some of our audience, because I know copyright, but it's an important issue. That's why we want to talk about it. Thank you both very, very much. All right, bye, y'all.
Thanks for having us, Rob.